Hello, welcome to Miles to Go. I'm Miles O'Brien. In this episode, we're going to dig deep into the mid-air collision near Washington's Reagan National Airport earlier this year, the one that claimed 67 lives and exposed serious cracks in our aviation safety system. My guest is once again Les Abend, longtime airline captain, aviation analyst, columnist for Flying Magazine, and a good friend of mine. We unpack a 3-day NTSB investigative hearing, a contentious one, full of revelations. We'll break down what went wrong that night, the helicopter's night vision training mission, the regional jet's circle-to-land approach, the confusing controller communications, and why a 75-foot margin between flight paths was an accident waiting to happen. Despite years of warnings and close calls, the FAA failed to take any action to fix a flawed air traffic pattern, and on the night of the crash, the control tower was short-staffed. This one's about more than one tragic night. It's about systemic problems and what it will take to fix them. Now, a listener and viewer note here. On several occasions during this podcast, I will be referring to some charts and graphics and video, which on the video version of this podcast works well. For those of you listening, please bear with me. And if you're curious, I invite you to go to my YouTube channel and check out Miles to Go there, and you can see what we're talking about. Enjoy the podcast. Les, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Miles.
So this hearing, 3 days in all, and long days, I should say, was extraordinary to me. I've watched a lot of these over the years. I'm not sure I remember one being quite as contentious as this one. How about you?
It's not many hearings that I've attended, but the ones that I have attended are very sort of somber. Right. There's normally, if anything gets to a contentious level, it's usually brought down by the chairman, and this was actually initiated by the chairman. So interesting, very interesting.
All right, let's set the table for our viewers and listeners and talk a little bit about the aircraft involved and remind them about this incident, which I'm sure they remember pretty well. But first of all, we're talking about a mid-air collision right near Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport. This is the CRJ 700. It's what you would call a regional jet. RJ is for regional jet, made by a Canadian company called Bombardier. What do we know about this aircraft, first of all, Les?
Well, it's nothing I've flown before, but it's a very reliable machine. It's sort of the backbone of a lot of regional carriers. It's been a good aircraft for the purpose that it serves.
Good safety record overall, and a true workhorse. If you've flown any sort of regional type of flying, you've likely been on one of these. About give or take 60 passengers, which is just about the death toll in this event. The collision occurred with one of these. This is a U.S. Army UH-60 Blackhawk. You're a civilian pilot strictly. You didn't fly in the military, correct?
I did not.
But this is a workhorse for the U.S. Army, right?
It really is. Yeah. And that's another reliable machine as well.
Yeah. And what we had was a training mission. The pilot receiving the instruction was flying at night, low level through Washington, D.C., using night vision goggles. Have you flown with those in the past?
I have not, but everything that I've researched about them, it's quite a transition to fly with those. It's incredible technology, but it takes some practice, and that's what was happening, as you mentioned. In addition to the fact this was an annual check ride that was using the night vision goggles.
Yes, I will tell you that I have precisely one night vision flight on a Bell Jet Ranger flying near Boise, Idaho. And the one thing I will say, the one thing I remember very distinctly is It's absolutely magical when it's dark. But the minute you point back toward the city, at least previous generations of night vision goggles, you immediately get this flare effect. It's actually counterproductive. So you have to wonder what might have been happening, what version of night vision goggles, and how much the city lights, just the ambient lighting, might have affected this, right?
You would think. I mean, I mean, the Washington area at night is, the whole area is highlighted, so it can be just total light pollution for everybody involved that's flying an aircraft.
All right, let's remind people where we are. We're zooming in here. This is the Atlantic Ocean. There's Boston, New York, et cetera, D.C. right down here, Chesapeake Bay. We'll zoom in and we'll show you the Potomac River. And Les, you've probably flown the Mount Vernon runway 1 approach countless times over the years, right?
I have back in my domestic days. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it was a little bit of a challenge.
It's mostly sporty flying, isn't it? It's a little bit sporty, isn't it?
It really is. You're taking a good sized jet into a very small piece of real estate.
One of your fellow American pilots once said, when you fly into National, LaGuardia, or Midway, it's kind of like a fixed aircraft carrier. You got to really be on your toes. They're short runways, obviously a lot going on around them. In this case, you got restricted airspace. There's the White House, the Capitol. When you fly in this direction, down to landing to the south, you actually follow the river, and you get this banking right turn right before you line up for final. It's a LDA approach, isn't it?
Yes, and although I believe it's now RNAV.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm showing my age here.
It was an LDA approach,
but it's very days. Yes, they used to light bonfires when I first went in there years ago, right?
But it's GPS primarily based now, but it's you got to be on your game.
Yeah,
you really got to be on your game for the to get the airplane. But at the end of the day, it's another piece of concrete to put the airplane down on.
You just got to stay focused, right?
That's you have to stay focused.
So what you had in this case was the regional jet, the CRJ 700 was headed in this direction, Mount Vernon approach, probably
Correct.
A little more over to the river there. And the helicopter on the night vision training, flying low level, kind of hugging the banks of the river on this side. And you would say, well, what's the problem there, right?
Well, but let me back you up a little bit now. That was part of the problem, is that he wasn't exactly hugging the bank. Well, so as we got close to Washington, we'll get to that later, but yeah. But there's no, and that's something we'll discuss as well, there's actually no lateral limits to these helicopter routes.
Which is interesting.
Yes. Okay, I didn't know that.
We'll get deeper on the helicopter routes, or as they were and as they are now, in a moment. But let's just lay out this. So lined up for runway 1, the controller has somebody right about here ready for departure. And so if you're a good controller and you want to keep the planes moving, move the tin, as they say, you might ask a smaller jet, because this is a shorter runway in this direction. This is runway 33 here. And not like if you were flying a larger aircraft, you probably wouldn't want to try that runway because it's pretty short, right?
5,200 feet is a little small. Yeah, so the RJ can easily handle that.
So they asked the crew, "Hey, would you mind doing what's called a circle to land?" Which is they're lined up for this, but what they do is go to basically a visual approach, swing out around here, and line up for final like that for runway 33. And this just allows the airport to keep the arrivals and departures going a little more efficiently than it would if they were landing on one. This guy would have had to wait. In this case, the guy was told while they were doing this to do an expedited departure. So he gets a departure out and he gets, kind of 2 movements for the price of 1, so to speak, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's an efficient operation as long as all the parts stay together cohesively. Yes.
Now, circle to land at night, visual flight rules. Would you have done that?
It's a good question. I wouldn't have landed with the airplanes I was flying. The
Right.
smallest one I flew in, it was a 727. Probably not, especially at night. But, here we have probably a younger crew. Everybody wants to help everybody. The controllers want to help the pilots want to help the controllers. So he attempts to accommodate this efficiency because he knows it's happened before, and he's a good pilot, right? And he wants to make this happen.
So, yes, sir, I'll help you out. No problem. I take the right turn. I circle back around over the Joint Base Anacostia. Meanwhile, the helicopter's on its way, and in a what's called Helicopter Route 4. And this is right about the spot where it all happens. We're going to show you some more footage in a moment. But what is really important to get across here is that helicopter route was designed in such a way that there was not much margin for error. Tell us about that.
Yeah, looking through some of the transcripts of this hearing, it appears that first of all, the altitude once they transitioned to that other route was 200 feet. That's pretty low to begin with, and then the difference between the glide slope that was going to be intercepted by that Canadair regional jet was about it put it about I don't know 75 feet below the 3-degree glide path for runway 33.
Les, why don't we watch? This is just a couple of minutes here. This is a video released by the NTSB, which takes the radar telemetry that they have and syncs it up with the air traffic control conversations between the controller and the flight crews, as well as text of the onboard communications among the crew, the stuff that wasn't transmitted. It's worth pointing out here that there was a shortage in the tower, right?
Correct. There was only one controller that was working two frequencies. One, normally it is a air traffic controller working fixed wing and an air traffic controller working helicopter. And in this case, it was only one.
So normally what you would have is a guy on Helicopter Freak and a guy on fixed wing, right? And what I've been reading about is one thing that is really great about helicopters, they can just stop and hover. And if there's a little potential concern, it's very easy to tell the helicopter to stop at, there's an island there called Haynes Point in the Potomac River, and just tell them, hey, hover for a couple seconds until we get this traffic in. And that's probably a likely scenario if there hadn't been an overwhelmed controller, don't you think?
Yeah, but the other part of it is now with the two frequencies, you don't have that situational awareness. One pilot is hearing what he thinks is a response, and the other pilot is not getting the other part of the transmissions. So it all comes together with situational awareness. What exactly is being told to the other pilot versus this pilot. So it does kind of break down the situational awareness.
I'm going to show my age here, but there's probably people in our audience who would remember what it's like to listen to a taxi cab dispatcher calling out cabs, right? You only hear the dispatcher, you don't hear the cabs, right?
Correct.
And that's basically what each crew got. They heard the dispatcher, but they didn't hear the responses.
Good,
So
good analogy.
They were getting half the conversation, which might have alerted them of the situation potentially. There's also, we're going to talk a little bit later, there's some technology that might have helped called ADSB. We're going to explain that a little bit later. Not on board the military aircraft. Now, your aircraft, if it were allowed at all in this part of Class B, which it wouldn't, but in this part of the world, ADSB would be required, this technology. And it wasn't in this case, military exempt from that. And that's an interesting little detail, which we'll get into as well. Once again, these things are never one thing, right? It's
exactly
that old Swiss cheese thing, right?
Exactly. Yep.
All right, let's just watch this for just a couple of minutes, and I'll put the audio up so we can listen to it, and you can hear a little bit of the communication. One of the things that's important to note here is the controller tells the helicopter, watch out for this CRJ 700. He's going to do a 3-3 approach, right? And what is the response is interesting, isn't it?
Well, it's confusing. There's no real. It doesn't seem like there's a. It seems like there's a disconnect that they weren't sure where exactly the traffic was, and they may have responded based on another visual sighting of a light that they were watching.
Remember, it's dark. There are lots of ambient lighting. Very confusing picking out the lights of an aircraft, particularly, as you know, the landing lights, of course, are facing forward. And this aircraft would have been perpendicular to the helicopter. So you wouldn't be seeing the landing lights and, glaring at you. You might see the green light of the starboard nav light. Maybe there might be a strobe you pick up. But again, it's against a sea of lights in the background, the logo light. The visual situation is not great, right?
No, because once again, it's a light pollution situation, especially in that area of Washington, D.C.
And maybe you're wearing those night vision goggles, which in this case might be harming you. So let's just watch this for a second.
American 16, turn to Windstar 3214, go to 5, traffic 2 mile left base, runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Muscle 7 request. Most of you say route through zone 6. Muscle 7 approved.
So at this point, he's already agreed to the circle to land, right? You can see he's diverting. Right. This is runway 1 here. This is runway 3 there. So he's going to do a loop around helicopter coming down the side there. Watch the altitudes.
Medevac Air Carrier 1 Washington Star National Altimeter 290. Approved for Washington class Robert Space 4 Land Sheridan Fairfax.
29090 for Air Carrier 1, copy.
He's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's flying down, essentially a glide slope. Well, in this case, it'd be probably using the PAPI lights, right? There are lights which tell him where he is. Or
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And there you see those altitudes converging at just, look at that. That
at just the wrong time.
It just gives me a sick feeling.
It does.
When I see it every time.
Yeah.
Now, this is surveillance video, just so you can see. Again, as we were talking about, these are the landing lights. You're sort of almost, the runway is right over here, right? So you're seeing him turn in. And let's see, where is... You got to wonder if they thought that might have been the aircraft, Could have been. At night, it's so hard to know, right?
And here's one thing that we ought to bring up to our viewers and listeners is that the altitudes that were being shown and highlighted was the magic of the NTSB. This is not something that the controller would necessarily be focusing on, because it seems obvious to us right now. But what they're doing is putting a light on how those altitudes ended up being the same. In the tragedy that occurred.
Helicopter right there.
Yep.
Oh, jeez.
Yep.
Just awful. So I mentioned Jennifer Homendy being very passionate, but before she got passionate, she gave kind of, I think it's worth less. You looked through, and I agree. Her introduction was really actually a good primer on what the NTSB role is. Why don't you go through some of it? We can go through it together. And which portions of it do you think are important for people to understand about what the NTSB's role is?
Well, in general, I think folks just think that that the ex-investigators are just digging through this wreckage, assembling things, making an analysis, and then in a dark room they come up with probable cause, and it's over. There's a big protocol to this. And really what the charter is for the NTSB. So if I may, I'll just read a couple of paragraphs here that I think are important for folks to understand what the NTSB is all about. And she covered it very well. So she begins with her introduction, and then she starts with this. For those who may not be familiar with the NTSB, we're an independent federal agency charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation accident in the United States and significant accidents and incidents in all other modes of transportation. At the conclusion of our investigations, we issue a final report that is deliberated at a public meeting and includes factual information gathered in the course of the investigation, analysis of that factual information, a set of findings, and a probable cause or causes. We also issue safety recommendations aimed at preventing recurrence of that accident or incident. That, to me, describes the entire mission and role of the NTSB, and I think that was important she brought that up.
Yes, and I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody do that. It's probably happened, but I thought it was very useful to kind of lay it out. What I think one of the things that people really should understand the most is in many other countries, these investigations quickly become criminal investigations, and people get arrested for mistakes that are made in this context. And in this country and other countries, the idea is to hold people harmless for their actions as far as criminal behavior. Now, you might get fired from the airline or you might lose your life, but whatever the case may be, the idea is if you take the penalties out of it, you get people to talk more candidly about what is happening, and ultimately that leads to a safer system. Do you think, Les, in most cases, is that the right way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. There's other proof of that as well. If we do something and make a mistake while we're flying, we have the ability to write down that mistake so that it can be filed away in a database, because if you made that mistake, somebody else may make the same mistake. And if there's no punitive actions, it was not intentional, then we can correct a potential systemic problem. And it's the same mission with the NTSB. Their objective is to try to ensure that what happened never happens again.
This is, there is this expression, the rules are written in blood, or there's a tombstone mentality. But the idea is it's really important to learn from these accidents. The reason aviation is so incredibly safe, by far the safest way to get from point A to point B, is because these accidents are seen as opportunities to improve the system. And when you stop doing that, you're making big mistakes.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an accident that happened at this very airport way back in the 80s by Air Florida, and it had to do with de-icing decisions, and that changed the world in how we approached de-icing and those procedures and protocols.
Yes, they call them watershed accidents. Air Florida in 1982 was one, and this is also a watershed as well. There's no question about it. Now let's, at the risk of confusing folks, take a look at this, people.
Well, you
this
got
should
that
clarify everything for you. So at the risk of, this is the kind of chart that a helicopter pilot understands, right? And we fixed wing guys kind of get it. It's fairly straightforward. It's a lot like looking at what we call a VFR sectional.
But let me give you a mentality here, but before you go over that.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you got that up on the screen. The mentality of a fixed wing pilot or jet pilot or airline pilot, they're looking at it and go, oh, okay, I see. They got these routes that they're going to follow. They're doing their thing. I'm doing my thing. That's the mentality.
Yeah. You, as a fixed wing pilot, you would not routinely look at this.
Correct.
Right. This would be completely transparent to you. A helicopter pilot going through this airspace is going to learn this pretty well. So basically, here's the airport that we just showed you a moment ago. This is what they call helicopter route 1. As you fly down past Chain Bridge and Key Bridge and past Memorial, it gets lower and lower ceiling. And then it switches right about here to helicopter route 4. And this, of course, is where the accident occurred. And at this point, the helicopter should not exceed 200 feet above ground and above sea level, pretty much the same thing. Correct. In Washington. And anything else about this chart that stood out to you? This is the way it was the day of the accident. Anything else that you found interesting, odd, or unsafe?
Well, I mean, after consideration, it's the rearview mirror thing. It's like, really, this is how they operate that close to the airport. Especially that route that goes right over the top of DCA. Although that tends to be the safest part of any airspace is above the airport itself.
You're talking about, this is Route 6.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when you fly your you're Piper and you flying in the Northeast, oftentimes, as you well know, you'll get right over the top of JFK.
Yeah.
And it's actually, you think, whoa, that sounds bad, but no, because it's an upside down wedding cake. There's nothing there, right?
That's
in
right.
theory.
In theory, but unfortunately, this wasn't the situation here.
Yeah.
And
so this is different. What you're talking about is this aircraft that was coming in like this, okay? And the interesting thing is that the published charts for both the fixed wing and the helicopter allowed for only 75 feet margin of error.
It's insane.
That's a stunningly small number.
Yeah, it is.
You know, explain just briefly a barometric driven altimeter or device that shows your altitude. It's not that precise.
It really isn't. I mean, it's basically in a jet of the RJ size, it's just a small motion on the control wheel. Just, I mean, 75 feet can go with a snap of a finger. You know, just with a normal distraction of checklists and putting flaps down and gear down, 75 feet is very small.
So, you know, this is a cliche statement, but this really was an accident waiting to happen, wasn't it?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because from the standpoint of we've done it all these years with never having an issue, you know, I'm to blame. You know, I guess when I was in and out of there, you know, I sat back fat, dumb, and happy, and hoped that, you know, everything was coordinated appropriately, as long as I followed the rules and everybody else followed the rules. But it was tenuous. It was tenuous all those years, and here we are.
As you know, I have spent a number of years covering NASA, and in particular the shuttle program. And subsequent to the loss of Challenger, a sociologist who was at Boston College at the time, by the name of Diane Vaughan, wrote a book called The Shuttle Launch Decision. But she described a sociological phenomenon called the normalization of deviance, which interestingly leads human beings, otherwise smart, engaged, safety-conscious human beings, to draw precisely the wrong conclusion from near collisions, near misses. In this case, this architecture you see right here with the 75 feet, over the previous couple of years prior to this accident, there had been 85 near collisions. 85. Now that is a system blinking red, but what human beings frequently do is go, oh, that happens all the time. We got that covered. And it's exactly the opposite conclusion you should be drawing. You should be saying, we've got trouble waiting here, as opposed to, oh, that's okay. It happens all the time.
I agree. Yeah. We just let things go without drawing attention to it, because drawing attention to it requires a lot of work, a lot of stress. And
I think a lot of what we do in flying is doing a little bit of work not to fall into accepting our human nature. You know, it's kind of like when you're in the clouds flying by the seat of your pants. Well, your body can tell you, think you're climbing when you're descending and so forth. You have to rely on the system and trust the system at some level. And I think human beings, there's a little trap in our brain, kind of deep in our amygdala brain on this or something.
Yeah. I hope that, you know, the NTSB gets into this at least a little bit, but they're doing very pragmatic things now that I think we have time to talk about, right?
All right, but this is an accident waiting to happen. You know, I think any pilot, anybody who took a few moments to look at that architecture knew it was trouble. The FAA clearly knew this was a problem spot, whatever you want to call it. Listen, this is when Jennifer Homendy nearly kind of lost it from the podium, and in my view, appropriately so. Let's listen to what she had to say as she was hearing kind of excuses from the ATO, Air Traffic Organization of the FAA, as to why this flight path, this tight margin wasn't addressed many years ago. Let's listen to her.
Everybody in FAA in the tower was saying there was a problem, but you guys are pointing out, well, our bureaucratic process, somebody should have brought it up at some other symposium. Are you kidding me? 67 people are dead. How do you explain that? our bureaucratic process, do you know we actually added up how many steps it takes to get from the tower to headquarters to figure out, and we ran all sorts of scenarios, how many steps it takes to get a policy change. 21 steps. Fix it. Do better.
Well said, right? I mean, what do you say? Wow.
That would make me cringe a little bit. But I think what she's doing is she's releasing her frustration from talking with the FAA. Before, I mean, this is scripted. This hearing, primarily, okay. Mm-hmm. So all this stuff happened in the background, where she probably spent some time with FAA bureaucrats, air traffic controllers, and it built to this point at the hearing, and she got her time. It just came out. So this wasn't just something that was an all of a sudden reaction.
Yeah, it was clearly building, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like she, in a very articulate, impassioned way, said what needed to be said there.
Yeah.
All right, now, so what they've done, and this is probably just going to further confuse people, but this is the new helicopter zones. And so basically, I think this might be too much, but the bottom line is, well, do you want to walk through it? Or what's the best way to do this? Or should we just say?
Well, I think we can, from a simplification standpoint, if you look on the left, that's what it was. Mm-hmm. All of those colors were all part of helicopter zones.
Right.
Now, if you look to the right, what's been done is they've drastically reduced the size of that real estate, or the size of that airspace. By zone. Doesn't matter which zone is what, but it just, they've drastically reduced where helicopters can operate near Washington, D.C. Or DCA.
Right. So don't get too bogged down in all this. But the point is, really the key thing is, this area here.
They've eliminated that one.
They've eliminated that, and so basically, I think if I'm.
And they've eliminated the one just to the west of that other zone as well in yellow.
So basically, you've got. I want to make sure I get this entirely correct. Here's the airport.
Right.
And instead of this crazy route, that's the previous route, is blue with green. What aircraft will do now is go around and do this.
Correct.
And which obviously takes them a long way away from any airliner approaching any of the runways from the south at Washington National. So that takes me back to what I was saying. This is an improvement, right? This happened almost immediately.
This
you
is
could make the argument it should have happened a long time ago, but at least it happened.
Well, and I'll tell you what, this happened very pragmatically and very quickly. This is Washington, D.C. I think that had a little bit to do with it. And I'm glad to see it. I think we're all glad to see it.
Well, it's worth pointing out, Washington, D.C., there were several pilots who fly that route with way more time than the typical military pilot. Some of the guys who fly medevac and law enforcement in that area who've been doing it for years and years. And one of the things that came up, in addition, we've talked about night vision and we've talked about some other factors, but is the relative lack of time that military pilots get these days. The amount of stick time they get has reduced over the years. And in this case, the amount of experience that a person would have is probably on the edge. And, the military might want to look at that and whether they need to either change their training, maybe not do their night recurrence right in the middle of Washington, D.C., or give these people a little more time and training in that environment.
Yeah. Well, it's all about budgets, right? Right, Miles?
It is indeed. Let's automatic dependent surveillance -B broadcast, ADS-B.
Right.
Do give folks a quick primer on what that is and why that might have helped in this case.
Yeah, it's just to simplify it. Essentially, rather than your standard radar bouncing off an aircraft's aluminum, what the aircraft itself now sends out a signal to a ground station, to a satellite, and back, So the aircraft is now sending out a signal about all the information that has to do with altitude, heading, so on and so forth. So it's a quicker image for the controller on the screen, and it's now a requirement for even small airplanes like the airplane I fly. So it's a lot quicker data in front of the controller. It gives you a lot more information.
It basically incorporates satellite data, GPS data,
Correct.
into the radar environment, which has always been the rap, that radar has, a certain amount of latency and inaccuracies, whereas GPS
Correct.
has more precision. And so by broadcasting out your GPS location on a radio transmitter, other aircraft can actually see that themselves.
Correct.
And the controller doesn't even have to be in the mix. And that adds to the safety in this. But, again, there were so many other factors at play here, but it's always a series of things. You have to wonder if one of those things, if maybe if there was no night vision, or maybe if there had been ADSB operative, or if there had been two controllers, or on and on it goes. Usually, that chain, if there's one link missing, means no accident.
And it's important to point out, though, even though the ADSB is probably a nice tool to have in the toolbox, and it wasn't available coming from that Black Hawk helicopter because they had a waiver, at the same time, controllers do have a discrete target that they're looking at. They know altitude, identification of the aircraft. So they do have a position by radar. Was it latent? Possibly. But, it wasn't like they were just a little dot on the radar screen.
Now, another system which you're very familiar with is terminal collision avoidance, TCAS. And that, another watershed accident way back in the 70s in San Diego, generated this technology, which gives pilots, flight crews like on an aircraft you have, not only indications of a possible collision, but actually gives you an escape solution. And it's pretty effective, isn't it?
It is, and primarily airliners have it. I don't have it on my airplane. The only thing I have is my altitude relative to another airplane's altitude, and I can tell direction of flight and so on and so forth. With the airlines, you're exactly right. It gives you a solution. It tells you to climb. It tells you to descend. It doesn't tell you to go left or right, but it tells you to do one of those or maintain altitude. So it will find a calculation and a solution for you to avoid that collision, and you abide by that and advise the controller that's exactly what you're doing, because the controller has to allow you to follow through with what you're seeing.
But as I understand it, it is not in use below, I believe, 1,500 feet. Is that correct? Is something like that?
It's been a little while, and I have to scratch my head, but I believe it's 1,000 feet, Miles, at that point. And there's only certain circumstances where we'll activate. Obviously, it wasn't an aid in this situation because of such a low altitude.
And is part of that they don't want you to send you on a course that would put you in the ground, or is it just too much traffic that you would be a bunch of clutter that would give you all kinds of warnings that you had to ignore?
Well, you're focused on the task of in this particular circumstance, landing the aircraft. So having to deviate from traffic could potentially, yes, send you into the ground when you should be focusing on getting the landing gear down, getting the flaps out, and landing the aircraft.
I think that does it for this one for now. That 3-day hearing was something else, and there was a lot to learn from it, and I assume the final report, there probably won't be many surprises if you paid much attention to it.
I think one of the interesting things before we leave this subject is that they've also vowed to put more personnel, make sure that there are two air traffic controllers in that tower controlling both fixed wing and a helicopter. In addition, these controllers are affected by this kind of tragedy, even ones that don't turn into tragedy. So what they've done is they've set up a team that is involved in critical incident stress management. I think that's really important for a stressful job like air traffic controlling.
It doesn't seem wise to be in an era of draconian federal government cutting to even get near this personnel. It's absolutely essential that these towers and these radar rooms and en route centers get staffed appropriately.
I agree. Absolutely.
All right, let's move to Air India Flight 171. We did our last podcast on it, and there's really, I think, pretty much what we said holds. What are your thoughts on it? First of all, anything that you find that has happened since we talked?
There's not a whole lot. I do commend the Accident Investigation Bureau in India for doing it methodically, doing it the way international protocol requires, so that they are not releasing information that is potentially sensational that the media will pick up on. They're keeping closed doors on that. In addition, if you go to their website, Air India's website, they are in constant contact with families. And I think that's important for this, as what we saw, you and I, for Malaysia 370. It was it's quite a contrast. But to answer your question with regard to the accident itself, it still appears they're sticking to the fact that those that you're just putting up on the screen now, Miles, those fuel control cutoff switches were manually moved to cutoff.
It's you talk about a gut punch when you start reading about this one, but these are the throttles, and these are the fuel control cutoff switches. They're closed to the throttles because in an emergency you want to be able to get to them very quickly.
Correct.
But for the same reason, you don't want them to be easily switched. And so to do this, you have to actually pull up on them and move them, and then there's kind of a cam, and then they kind of lock into place. It's kind of it's a cumbersome action. It's not anything you can do by brushing against it, right?
It is, and we use them every flight. I mean, to start the airplane, we've got to move those switches, and they function. They have various functions to them as well. And when we come to the gate and we shut off the engines, we have to move those switches. So, was there a possible electronic malfunction? It really doesn't seem that way. It just doesn't. Was it a pilot mistake? You can point out the flap handle, Miles. Did they possibly reach for the flap? I mean, look at the shape of the flap handle versus the fuel control. The speed brakes are right.
Speed brakes. I mean,
and you can't. And the landing gear handle is so far up that in this particular photo you can't see it.
You can't even see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a mistake. It seems very deliberate to me. But why? We just want we want to know why. And
I'm not sure we're going to know on that one. Why on these are these are the hard ones on why, and. As you were pretty eloquent about it, about how, a really, dare I say, near sacred sacred bond of trust is broken in this case, and no one who's in your profession likes to see this.
No. I know there's a lot of sensationalism out there, with like who did it, and there was a nefarious intention, but let's wait for this. Investigation to run its course, because there's more information out there that we have at this point in time, especially with the cockpit voice recorder transcripts.
But nothing you've seen since we talked changes your thinking. I haven't seen anything either that changes my thinking on this one.
No, and I don't want to put guilt to one pilot or the other. I just want to establish what happened here. Do we have a mental health issue potentially? And who might it be? Could we have prevented it? That's really the whole gist of why we do this investigation.
Okay, some final thoughts. Opportunity to share some knowledge, because demystifying aviation is, I think, something we are both passionate about. Help folks understand how air traffic, now it's complicated, but there's some simple concepts here. How does air traffic control monitor traffic? It's really, when you think about it, it's kind of amazing that it all works on a good day.
It does. It's old technology, but it does work. It works from on airport level all the way up to 42,000 feet or higher. So there's what we call a primary target, which means the radar reflects off of a piece of aluminum and says, well, that's an airplane out there potentially. Or primarily is how airliners are controlled, is with a discrete target. And you give them what we call a transponder code, which is a 4-digit code that you put in a machine called a transponder. And that tells the controller, this is who you are. And this tells you and identifies your aircraft, identifies your altitude. And that's primarily what the controllers utilize now. And it's integrated, as you said, very well with the automatic dependent surveillance broadcast system, which is GPS-based with satellite and with ground-based stations, which makes it even more accurate and reduces the latency. But let's take it to the level of the Washington control tower, right? These folks also have they're called the local controller, because they're literally in the tower looking out, visually seeing airplanes, right? But they also have a radar display. Most times it's up in the cab, dropped down from a portion of their outside windows, and they have what we call a repeater. It's probably the wrong terminology. It's probably a more exacting terminology to it, but it repeats what the approach controllers who sit in a dark room just stare at. So they can confirm their visual sightings with what they see on the radar as well. And that's primarily how they control traffic.
There are many ways that all of that could be improved with technology. And there have been repeated attempts over the years to do it, and it's come in fits and starts. I think we can both agree that what we just saw at this past year, at the beginning of this year, at Reagan Airport, aside from moving the helicopter routes, which was easy and done, I'm hoping it provides sustained impetus to improve the system technologically, because it is time to move to another era where literally the controllers in these tower cabs are still stacking up aircraft sequences with paper strips, and the computers. There's been lots of stories about the age of the computers and how antiquated the system is, and how many systems are antiquated way beyond their useful lives. And it is time to take seriously the improvements necessary, because there are all these layers, and that's why it's safe. But as you shave away the layers, bad things can happen, which is what we just saw here.
True. And we have the technology in the airplanes. I mean, we have airplanes that will literally land themselves and just land straight ahead on the runway. We should be able to have that same technology transition to air traffic control as well. It should be out there.
All right, that's a good place to leave it. Les, always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, Miles.
That's all for this edition of Miles to Go. My thanks to Les Abend for his insight and candor, and for helping us demystify the complexities of modern aviation. If there's one takeaway here, it's this: aviation is still the safest way to travel, but that safety depends on layers of protection, training, technology, procedures, and oversight. When any of those layers start to thin, as they did over Washington that night, disaster can follow. The good news, we have the tools and the knowledge to fix this. The NTSB's investigation is a roadmap, not just to understand what happened, but to prevent it from happening again. I'm Miles O'Brien. Thanks for listening and watching. If you enjoyed this episode, follow, rate, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories at the intersection of technology, safety, and the human factor.